Millionaire shocked to see female beggar pleading for food on the street over a secret. The city buzzed around him, lights flashing and horns blaring. But Richard Montrose stood rooted, his heart pounding like a drum in a silent room. Right there, on the cracked pavement, beneath flickering neon signs, was a girl. Thin, tangled hair, clothes torn and stained, begging for food like she hadn't eaten in days. But that girl was supposed to be safe inside his mansion. His daughter, Isabella. Richard's hands trembled, fists clenched so tight his nails bit into his palms. He couldn't breathe. People passed by, eyes averted or staring with disgust. Whispers slipped through the cold air. "Is that really her? How could this happen?" A woman muttered. "The Montrose girl begging on the street? Unbelievable." Isabella's eyes caught his, a wild blaze of defiance mixed with a raw, terrible sadness that stabbed through Richard's chest. Her lips quivered, voice breaking. "Please." How long had she been here? How could he have been so blind, so careless? The sprawling mansion, gleaming with wealth and silence, was miles away from this grimy street corner where his daughter was forced to survive. Behind the scenes, a darker truth whispered through the shadows. Sylvia, the woman he'd trusted to care for Isabella, smiled with cold calculation, weaving lies as easily as breathing. She had turned Richard's absence into her playground, using the chaos to line her pockets and hide the girl away from the world, trapped beneath the weight of secrets. Richard's mind raced. Images of luxury, empty rooms, lost time crashing against the stench of the street, the jittery shuffle of feet, and the rough hands pressing coins into trembling palms. The silence between words screamed louder than any noise. A sudden shout cracked through the air, a furious vendor chasing Isabella away from his stall. She dodged with desperate speed, clutching a battered cardboard sign with feint. What had Sylvia really been hiding? And was Isabella's fate more tangled than Richard could imagine? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has removed their subscriptions without warning. Just take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss out on any exclusive content coming your way. And while you're there, leave that powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know all the amazing people who are part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. Richard's heart raced as he took a hesitant step forward, the crowd swirling around him like a storm. Isabella's gaze flickered, searching for recognition, a spark of hope. He could almost taste the regret on his tongue, sour and bitter. People turned, eyes wide with shock. Richard spun around, searching for the source. In the middle of the street, a man, disheveled and wild with rage, was waving a gun above his head. The glint of metal caught Richard's eye, and his stomach dropped. It wasn't just chaos, it was terror. "Get away from her!" the man screamed, his voice tearing through the din. Richard's breath hitched as he saw the man was charging toward Isabella. Panic surged through him. "Isabella!" he shouted, the name tearing from his lips like a lifeline. But fear rooted him to the ground as he watched the scene unfold. The whispers around him morphed into shouts, panic swelling in waves. "What's happening? Someone call the police!" Isabella's eyes widened, pure horror reflected back at him. The vendors surrounded them, a mass of shouting voices blending into a cacophony of fear. The man was close now, strides getting bigger, eyes crazed. Richard fought to move, but the invisible weight of the crowd made escape impossible. They were trapped in a box of judgment and chaos, trapped in a swirling storm of emotions. Then, in an instant, a fresh wave of shock washed over Richard. The gunman was familiar. He stepped closer, squinting through the chaos. Was it Michael? His old friend? The one who had vanished years ago, leaving Richard to pick up the pieces? They had been inseparable once, laughing over drinks, dreaming of a bright future. But now this man stood as an unrecognizable shadow, cloaked in rage and desperation. Why, Richard? Why did you leave her? Michael's voice dripped with venom, every word slashing through Richard like glass. Memories crashed into him, silent nights filled with regret and the friendship shattered by greed and betrayal. Isabella cowered on the ground, the cardboard sign slipping through her fingers. Richard's heart sank. He had forgotten about Michael's decade-long fight with addiction, lost in his own world of privilege, while Michael faded into darkness. "Please," Richard croaked, desperate for the chance to explain, to reason. But Michael's eyes burned with unrelenting fire. "You think you can just choose to walk away? You think your money fixes everything?" Richard felt the eyes of the crowd bore into him, judging. His mansion meant nothing here. They wanted answers, and he had none. The air thickened, thick with dread, panic twisting into something darker. Isabella looked between them, confusion and betrayal playing across her features. "Dad!" The word fell from her lips like a plea, and it shattered Richard's heart into 1,000 pieces. It was more than shame. It was a realization. The truth hung heavy, threatening to suffocate them all. The very fabric of his family was unraveling before his eyes. And then, just when it felt like the world had narrowed to that frantic moment, something exploded nearby. The crowd gasped, frenzied. Richard's heart raced in his chest as he looked back toward Michael. The hatred twisted on his face. The last thread of understanding snapped as chaos erupted around them. What had he overlooked? What other secrets lay buried beneath the weight of their lives? Richard's brain whirled. What did Michael know? Why was Isabella on the street? Was he truly the hero? Or was he the villain in this story? As the smoke curled up through the air, Richard realized with dawning horror that the nightmare had only just begun. And everything he thought he knew about his family, his wealth, and even himself was about to unravel in the most terrifying way. Richard's heart thundered in his chest, drowning out the chaos around him. Michael's face was twisted in fury, the gun still raised. The crowd roared, a mix of panic and disbelief. But all Richard could see was Isabella, the fear etched in her features like an unbearable mark. Time stretched. This was the moment everything would change. Then, without warning, a blinding flash lit up the street. It wasn't from the gun. It came from the nearby cafe window. An explosion erupted, glass shattering like a storm of diamonds, raining down on the terrified crowd. Richard instinctively shielded his face, but he heard the screams. The world around him transformed into chaos. In that moment, the gun dropped. A figure emerged through the debris. A woman, calm yet fierce, weaving through the broken bodies and startled faces. Richard's breath hitched. It was Sylvia. She looked different, purposeful. Her gaze was void of the care he once thought she had for Isabella. "Get her out now," Sylvia commanded, pointing toward Isabella. Richard's heart raced. Why was Sylvia here? Shouldn't she have been looking after Isabella? Was she here to save her? "No!" Richard shouted, panic clenching at his throat. "You won't take her!" He dashed forward, but then he saw it. The glint of something in Sylvia's hand. It wasn't just a phone, as he initially thought. It looked like a small gun. "Stand back!" she yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos. The crowd was still reeling, too stunned to move, but Richard's instincts kicked in. It didn't make sense. Was she in on this scheme? Was she behind Michael's madness, or merely caught up in the aftermath? "I will shoot, Richard," Sylvia warned. but doubt twisted in her eyes. "Don't think I won't." "Isabella, come to me," Richard called, but she hesitated, still shaking on the ground. Time fractured. Richard could sense the collective fear of the crowd, a living organism, pulsing with uncertainty. Then, with a roar, Michael charged, catching Sylvia off guard. They collided. Richard blinked, his heart dropping as they wrestled for control over the gun. He wanted to scream, to intervene, but his feet felt glued to the ground. In a split second, the gun went off. The deafening crack echoed through the noise, shock freezing everyone in place. Richard's blood ran cold. Did it hit someone? He glanced around, desperate eyes searching for Isabella. Sylvia staggered back, the gun slipping from her fingers. "No," she gasped, but Richard barely registered her words. The realization crashed into him. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. As he rushed to Isabella, a name surfaced in his mind, unbidden and shocking. A name he thought he'd left behind. "Emily," he gasped, the horror of it twisting inside him. His sister, the very same sister who had vanished years ago, creating a fissure in his family, a quarrel he buried under wealth and prestige. But now, as everything erupted into chaos, a ghost from his past lingered like a specter, hovering between the reality of gunfire and shattered glass. His fingers tangled in Isabella's hair as he pulled her up. She looked at him, confusion marring her features. "Is it true, Dad?" The surrounding murmurs swelled. "What's going on? Is he a monster?" "Is it?" she repeated, desperation flooding her tone. From the ground, Michael's deep voice rose, raw with pain. "She never wanted you, Richard. Not then. Not now." With that, everything shifted. Richard's mind spun. Secrets unfurled and truths long buried clawed their way to the surface. Years of lies, years of neglect. His heart thudded painfully in his chest. So much was unraveling. The gun lay forgotten. The crowd was still, and suddenly Richard was faced with everything he avoided. Silently, the question loomed. Was he truly the hero, or had he been the fool all along, playing into someone else's grand design? And with that, under the smoky twilight, the world spun out of control, leaving him gasping for answers nobody could give. Richard's heart was a drum, thumping loudly as he grasped for clarity. Around him, chaos danced, a storm of screams, glass shards, and shadows. Everyone was caught in the moment, breathing in panic. But all he could see was Isabella, her wide eyes reflecting fear deeper than he could bear. "Is it true, Dad?" she asked again, her voice trembling. The words hit him like a punch. He opened his mouth to answer, but what could he say? The lies piled heavy between them, pressing down on his chest. He wanted to wrap her in his arms, to erase the terror etched into her features. Then the sound of the gunshot rang through the air, sharp and cruel. Richard's blood turned to ice. No, not another shot. Suddenly, Michael lay on the ground, face down, motionless. Richard's heart sank as fear washed over him like a tidal wave. The crowd froze for a split second. "Someone call an ambulance," a voice shrieked from the throng. Others echoed the plea, but Richard couldn't move. His eyes zeroed in on Michael's body, disbelief wrapping around his throat like a noose. He was alive yesterday. What was happening? A woman appeared at the edge of the crowd, moving with an eerie calm. It was Sylvia, her expression clear, almost cold. "Get the girl, now!" she barked, looking right at Isabella. Richard's stomach dropped, dread pooling at his feet. "No!" The word burst from his lips. His instincts screamed at him. Catalina's body lay still. He glanced at Isabella, who looked back in panic. "Stay here," he ordered, but in that instant, her trust shattered. She stood, eyes darting between him and Sylvia, Sylvia brandished the small gun, her stance unwavering, the smoke curling in the air between them. "I said to get her." The low voice was a dagger, cutting deeper than Richard ever thought possible. She was no rescuer. She was a puppet master, pulling strings behind the curtain. The realization of her betrayal stabbed him just as hard as the tension in the air. "Isabella, come to me." Richard's voice cracked, desperation clawing at his heart. But Isabella hesitated, caught between two forces. "Dad?" The uncertainty in her tone made his chest ache. Then, suddenly, chaos flared. From the edge of the street, a figure emerged, silhouetted by the flashing lights. Richard squinted. Was that Emily? The name escaped his lips before he could pull it back. His sister, lost to him years ago, was walking toward them as if she'd never left. But she looked altered, shadows under her eyes and a fierce intensity in her gaze. "Richard," she shouted, her voice slicing through the noise. "You need to stop this. They're coming for us." His mind raced. What was happening? Questions churned. How could she be here? How did she know about any of this? His family, the lies, the abandonment, the hidden news stories, flashed before his eyes. Sylvia's grip on her gun wavered as she turned, bringing an unsettling recognition. "How? You were supposed to be gone." Her voice hissed with rage. The gun trembled in her hands. "No," Richard pleaded. "Emily, you don't understand." But his sister was the one holding the truth now, warning bells ringing in his ears about a past he thought buried. Isabella looked between all of them, confusion morphing into fear. "Who are you?" she breathed. "Your aunt," Emily said, eyes fierce, leaning in, urging them to listen. "They've been lying. Sylvia's in on it. She's the reason you were hidden, Richard. This is bigger than just us." Everything collapsed in a whirlwind. Richard's heart raced, a mess of past failures and present chaos. Sylvia was not just a caretaker. She was a thorn in every plan, sinking roots deep into family secrets. The crowd gasped, eyes shifting, confusion morphing into panic once more. Richard's heart surged with a sense of impending doom. What if Emily was right? What if everything he'd known until now was a lie that spiraled beyond the truth he could face? "Run!" Emily shouted, a command that pulled them all out from their frozen states. But then, a sound, a revving engine cut sharply through the air. And before Richard could register the panic, a black van careened down the street, tires screeching, racing straight at them. Everything shattered in that moment. The past raced back to claim them, and the truth of his so-called life began to crack like fragile glass. What was he willing to lose to save them? Who could he trust? As Richard's heart pounded, one question echoed V. Richard's heart raced as the black van barreled down the street, tires screeching like sirens in the night. Time stretched, panic thickening the air. He couldn't move. He felt Isabella gripping his arm, her small fingers trembling, eyes wide with terror. "Dad, what do we do?" "Emily!" he shouted, his voice raw as he turned to his sister, desperation bubbling inside him. "What's happening? Get her to safety!" Emily yelled back, her voice fierce. But even in the chaos, Richard could see the fear creeping into her eyes. Sylvia's gun was still raised, her gaze darting back and forth, confusion etched on her face. "Everyone clear the way," she barked. But no one budged. The crowd was frozen, a mass of uncertainty and shock. Richard threw a glance at Michael's body, lying lifeless on the ground. A knot tightened in his stomach. What had he just witnessed? "Move!" Emily screamed, and suddenly she was running towards the van, her silhouette a fleeting shadow in the chaos. The van accelerated, its engine roaring, and Richard's heart sank. "Emily!" he cried out, horror gripping him. But she didn't stop. Instead, she pulled something from her pocket, a glimmering object catching the light. What's she doing? Richard thought. stomach fluttering with dread. The van swerved toward her, but she stood firm, shouting something he couldn't hear over the uproar. Then it happened. With a swift flick of her wrist, Emily threw the object. It sailed through the air, like time slowing down, and Richard's breath caught in his throat. It landed against the van's windshield, the sound of glass shattering echoing through the crowd like a gunshot. Screams erupted as shards of glass rained down, the driver slamming on the brakes. The van veered wildly, then crashed into a nearby streetlight with a deafening crash. The world turned to chaos, the loud honks of cars mixing with the terrified cries of bystanders. In that moment, everything changed. The driver jumped out, face pale with panic. And as he stumbled away from the wreck, something slipped from his pocket, a small but unmistakable flash drive. Richard's heart pounded as he recognized it. "No, it can't be," he whispered. But the truth hit him like a freight train. That flash drive held the secrets of the Montrose family, every dirty little secret he'd buried deep. And now it lay in the middle of the street, at the heart of a growing storm. "Get back!" Sylvia screeched, but it was too late. A crowd surged toward the van, curiosity morphing into frenzy. Silence pierced the din. Richard's breath became shallow as he realized the game had changed. It was no longer just about Isabella, not just about Sylvia or Michael. This was bigger. The driver took off down the street, shouting something incomprehensible. But among the chaos, Richard locked eyes with Emily again. They were both drowning in a world of half-truths and lies. Every piece of the shattered puzzle was surging to the surface. "Isabella," he shouted, pulling her closer. "We can't stay here." But her gaze was fixed on the van, wide-eyed and trembling. Then suddenly, a figure emerged from the crowd. An elderly man, frail but determined, pointed a finger at Richard. You did this," he cried, voice shaking. The crowd shifted, whispers sprouting like weeds, and the scrutiny felt like a tidal wave, threatening to sweep Richard away. He dropped his gaze, feeling the weight of judgment pressing down. "I didn't," but the words faded. No one would understand, not now. Then, amid the chaos, Richard's phone buzzed violently in his pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. A text from an unknown number read, "You've done well, but the truth is just beginning. Meet me where it all started." Richard's mind spun. What did it mean? The past he thought was buried was clawing its way back. He looked at Isabella, her innocence suddenly tainted by the drama surrounding them. The stakes had risen, and he had no idea what to trust anymore. "Let's go," he called, grabbing Isabella's hand. But in the crowd, feeling eyes upon them, he couldn't shake the growing dread that everything, the lies, the betrayals, wasn't merely unraveling. It was all part of a game, a sinister design playing out right before him. As the noise engulfed them, Richard wondered if he could escape this web of deceit. And somewhere, deep inside, a question loomed larger than ever. Who really held the reins of fate in this twisted tale? Richard's heart raced as the black van barreled down the street, tires screeching like sirens in the night. Time stretched, panic thickening the air. He couldn't move. He felt Isabella gripping his arm, her small fingers trembling, eyes wide with terror. "Dad, what do we do?" "Emily," he shouted, his voice raw as he turned to his sister, desperation bubbling inside him. "What's happening? Get her to safety!" Emily yelled back, her voice fierce, but even in the chaos, Richard could see the fear creeping into her eyes. Sylvia's gun was still raised, her gaze darting back and forth, confusion etched on her face. "Everyone clear the way," she barked, but no one budged. The crowd was frozen, a mass of uncertainty and shock. Richard threw a glance at Michael's body, lying lifeless on the ground. A knot tightened in his stomach. What had he just witnessed? "Move!" Emily screamed, and suddenly she was running towards the van, her silhouette a fleeting shadow in the chaos. The van accelerated, its engine roaring, and Richard's heart sank. "Emily!" he cried out, horror gripping him. But she didn't stop. Instead, she pulled something from her pocket, a glimmering object catching the light. What's she doing? Richard thought, stomach fluttering with dread. The van swerved toward her, but she stood firm, shouting something he couldn't hear over the uproar. Then it happened. With a swift flick of her wrist, Emily threw the object. It sailed through the air like time slowing down, and Richard's breath caught in his throat. It landed against the van's windshield. The sound of glass shattering echoing through the crowd like a gunshot. Screams erupted as shards of glass rained down, the driver slamming on the brakes. The van veered wildly, then crashed into a nearby streetlight with a deafening crash. The world turned to chaos, the loud honks of cars mixing with the terrified cries of bystanders. In that moment, everything changed. The driver jumped out, face pale with panic, and as he stumbled away from the wreck, something slipped from his pocket. A small bee. Richard's heart pounded as he recognized it. "No, it can't be," he whispered. But the truth hit him like a freight train. That flash drive held the secrets of the Montrose family. Every dirty little secret he'd buried deep. And now it lay in the middle of the street, at the heart of a growing storm. "Get back!" Sylvia screeched, but it was too late. A crowd surged toward the van, curiosity morphing into frenzy. Phones were out, filming every moment, every fear, every gasp of shock. Richard could see Isabella, her face scrunched in confusion, flickering in and out of his line of sight. Silence pierced the din. Richard's breath became shallow as he realized the game had changed. It was no longer just about Isabella, not just about Sylvia or Michael. This was bigger. The driver took off down the street, shouting something incomprehensible. But among the chaos, Richard locked eyes with Emily again. They were both drowning in a world of half-truths and lies. Every piece of the shattered puzzle was surging to the surface. "Isabella!" he shouted, pulling her closer. But in the crowd, feeling eyes upon them, he couldn't shake the growing dread that everything, the lies, the betrayals, wasn't merely unraveling. It was all part of a game, a sinister design playing out right before him. Then, out of nowhere, a loud crash interrupted the air. Richard turned just in time to see a second van screeching to a halt. Tires burning, the door swung open, and a group of men in black masks poured out. Their eyes were wild, scanning the crowd, moving with sharp precision. "Get her! Get the girl!" one of them shouted, pointing directly at Isabella. Panic erupted all around them. The crowd screamed, parting like storm clouds before a tempest. Richard's heart stopped. They were coming for Isabella. "No!" Richard screamed, voice breaking as he lunged forward, pulling Isabella tightly against him. But then Emily stepped in front of them, hands raised. "Stop! You don't understand!" A chilling smile crept over one of the masked men, and Richard's heart dropped as he recognized him. The man leaned closer to Emily, eyes glinting with mockery. "You think you can protect her? You're the reason we're here." Richard's world imploded. As the crowd fell silent, a deeper truth crackled in the air. Emily was involved. She wasn't just his sister. She was deeply entrenched in this dark world. "What did you do?" Richard breathed, the line between family and enemy blurring in an instant. "Richard, listen," Emily pleaded, but her words faded within the chaos. The masked men shifted closer, tension curling in the air like smoke. Richard's throat tightened. The stakes were rising, and as the truth began to flicker overhead, he realized that the past, the present, none of it was what he thought. Could his sister be a traitor? Could all their lives have been a mirage of safety, obscured by family bonds? His heart raced as he absorbed the shock. The real puzzle lay barely hidden beneath layers of deception, and the one he'd trusted most might be the very key to his family's downfall. "Run!" he shouted, grabbing Isabella's hand. But already the world was breaking apart. With each step, uncertainty swirled around them. He needed answers, but how deep did the treachery run? As they dashed toward the dark alleyways, Richard's breath caught. Was anyone truly safe anymore? Richard's heart pounded as he gripped Isabella's hand, fear mingling with confusion. The crowd surged, people shoving to ensure their safety, gasping at the chaos unfurling before them. Sylvia's panicked shouts blended into the cacophony. They had to escape. Don't look back, Richard urged, pulling Isabella toward the alley. He could feel her little heart racing, matching his own. She stumbled slightly, a torn piece of fabric from her clothes catching on a jagged edge of the sidewalk. "We'll get through this, I promise," he whispered, even though he couldn't shake the dread pooling in his gut. Emily was at their side, fierce determination flashing in her eyes. "Keep going, we have to find a safe place." But even as they rushed ahead, Richard's thoughts spiraled. Was Emily truly allied with those men? Why was everyone after Isabella? The tangled threads of his life clawed at him, darkening his mind with shadows of betrayal. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed. A blinding light filled the alley. Richard instinctively shielded Isabella with his body as the trio stumbled back, hearts leaping. Smoke began to fill the space, thick, choking. "Get down!" Emily screamed, dropping beside them. And then, from the swirling chaos, a figure emerged. A woman, tall and imposing, with wild hair and fierce eyes. Richard recognized her. Marissa, the aunt he'd thought was lost to the family feud years ago, rumored to have been involved in the very betrayal that tore them apart. "What are you doing here?" Richard gasped, confusion washing over him. "Richard!" she shouted over the noise, hands raised as if to keep them at bay. "I'm here to save you!" The word sent a jolt through him. Save them? After all this time? "You're part of this?" he exclaimed, betrayal bubbling up yet again. "I was forced to," she began. But before she could finish, the thudding of boots echoed close, the masked men closing in, screaming for the girl. "Run! I'll hold them off!" Marissa yelled, stepping toward the danger. Richard's heart lurched. "No, we can't leave you," Isabella cried, the innocent desperation cutting through the chaos. "Just go," Marissa shouted fiercely. "Get to safety. Find out the truth." Richard hesitated for a beat before the sound of angry shouts drew near. He grabbed Isabella's hand tighter. This isn't happening, he thought, every instinct screaming to not leave her. And then, in a twist of fate, a loud explosion erupted from behind them, as the van from earlier erupted in flames. Heat washed over Richard, singeing his skin, as the air filled with sounds of cracking metal and breaking glass. The masked men halted in shock, their attention riveted to the blaze. "Now, Richard!" Emily shouted, urgency cracking her voice. With no other choice, he yanked Isabella forward, darting into the deeper shadows of the alley, adrenaline driving them forward. But just as they turned a corner, Richard felt his heart drop when a horrifying realization struck him. The flash drive, the secrets, were still out there. Who had Emily shared those secrets with? Could Marissa be trusted? No, he breathed. He had to figure this out. But as they ran, the weight of his past loomed larger, clawing at him, demanding his attention. And then it happened. A figure lunged into their path, blocking their exit. It was Michael, alive but wild-eyed, fear twisting his features. "Richard," he yelled, desperation raging through every syllable. "I need you to listen." "What do you want?" Richard spat, fury and confusion mixing inside him. "Everything hinges on you," Michael's voice cracked. "You don't know the truth about your family. It's all connected to you." Before Richard could respond, swirling shadows gathered and formed a barrier behind them. Their world began to collapse again, the past coming back with a vengeance. He felt Isabella squeeze his hand tighter. And in that moment, confusion morphed into dread. What truth? What secrets were still waiting to be unveiled? Things were about to get a lot darker, and as he stood at the brink of chaos, Richard realized they were far from safe. Everything he thought he knew was about to unravel in the most shocking way possible. Richard's heart pounded as he stood there, the world narrowing around him. Michael's wild eyes bore into him, desperation flooding every syllable. "Richard, you need to listen!" But the urgency in Michael's voice was drowned out by the chaos swirling around them. The crowd, the revelation, the masked men creeping closer. Each breath felt heavier, the weight of the moment suffocating. "What do you want?" Richard's voice cracked, the fear tightening around his throat. Isabella squeezed his hand tighter, sensing the tension. "You can't be serious. Everything hinges on you." Michael shouted back, and people stopped, their fear and curiosity intertwining. Richard's stomach twisted painfully as Michael's words sank in. "You don't know the truth about your family. It's all connected to you." A cold shiver snaked up Richard's spine. A knot of dread twisted in his gut. What truth? What can you possibly know? Just then, with a deafening roar, another van screeched to a halt behind them. Tires screamed against asphalt, and suddenly the doors flung open. A group of men poured out, faces obscured by masks, black uniforms gleaming ominously. "Get the girl," one of them shouted, pointing straight at Isabella. The crowd erupted into panic, chaos rolling like a tidal wave. Richard's heart raced, adrenaline spiking. It was all spiraling out of control. "Run!" Emily shouted, urgency clawing at her voice. But Richard was frozen, heart pounding in his chest. And then Michael stepped forward, eyes fierce, desperation etched across his face. "You have to trust me. They're not what you think. This is about more than just Isabella." "What are you talking about?" Richard barked, the fear morphing into confusion, his mind racing. But before Michael could explain, the men lunged for them, shouting orders. Richard's instincts kicked in. "Go! Isabella!" He grabbed her hand, pulling her back into the alley as chaos erupted around them. They ducked behind a dumpster, gasping for breath, the noise swirling like a storm. Richard could hear the angry shouts behind them, footsteps pounding the pavement. The world outside felt like a blur. "Are we safe?" Isabella whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Tears brimmed in her gaze, and Richard hated it. He needed to protect her, needed to find a way out. But just then, a blinding flash of light exploded in front of him. The ground shook violently. Richard's heart dropped as he realized an explosion. The alley lit up for a split second, and a wall of debris came crashing down. Smoke billowed around them, choking the air, suffocating their escape. "Get under," he shouted, covering Isabella with his body as dust and dirt rained down like a storm. In that heart-stopping moment, a shadow loomed in the smoke. It was a figure stepping through the debris, unaffected by the chaos. Richard squinted, instinct screaming, and then it hit him. Is that? It was Marissa, but she looked different, her expression strong and resolve fierce. "We need to go, now," she called, voice cutting through the haze. "What are you doing?" Richard gasped. Heart racing. "I thought you were gone. I've been watching everything unfold," Marissa said, her gaze directing the chaos around them. "I know the secrets. I know what they want." Secrets? Richard felt a tightness in his chest, everything crashing down. "What is going on? What do you know?" Before she could answer, a loud crash interrupted them. Part of the building nearby crumbled down, and they had to pull Isabella closer. Time was slipping through his fingers, and family ties were fraying. But then, a horrifying realization struck. Marissa pulled something from her pocket, a small device glimmering in the light. "This contains everything, Richard. The real story of our family," she said, voice steady. Richard's blood ran cold. What do you mean? What's on there? And then, in a breathless pause, as shadows closed in and confusion thickened, Marissa's eyes flickered with something different, something darker. I did what I had to do to protect our family, Richard, even when it meant betraying you. The silence jolted him. Betraying him? Everything was falling apart. Betrayal? Richard echoed, heart racing. What are you talking about? But before she could answer, everything exploded. The ground shook violently, and a deafening boom resonated through the air. The other masked men had returned, a hull of shock and betrayal plastered across their faces as chaos erupted again. Richard felt the walls closing in, the truth, the lies, all colliding at once. Who could he trust in this chaos? His heart thudded painfully, a question echoing in his mind. Had everything he thought he knew been a carefully crafted illusion? Then suddenly, a scream pierced through the chaos. Richard turned, and the sight stopped his heart. Isabella was gone, disappeared into the swirling darkness. Panic surged through him. "Isabella!" he cried, voice cracking. But the whispers drowned him out, and fear clawed at his chest. As Richard stood there, surrounded by betrayal and confusion, one question loomed larger than all the others. What price would he pay for the truth? And could he bring his daughter back before it was too late? Richard's heart raced as he stood there, the chaos around him blurring into a distant roar. He could feel the weight of dread pressing down, every second stretching painfully as he called out for Isabella. "Where are you?" Panic clawed at his throat, making it hard to breathe. "Isabella!" he shouted again, voice rough with fear. Time bled together, and all he could see were flashbacks of her frightened face, the way she'd clung to him like he was her lifeline. But now she was gone, lost in the upheaval of screaming chaos and shattering dreams. "Dad!" Emily shouted, her voice breaking through his spiraling thoughts. "We need to keep moving." But Richard couldn't. Not when his daughter was missing. "What do you mean, we need to keep moving?" Determination filled his voice, sharp and urgent. He would find her. He had to. Without thinking, he pushed past the wreckage of the alley, adrenaline coursing through him. The air was thick with smoke, blurring his vision, but his mind had sharpened. Each step felt like running through mud, quicksand pulling him down. Voices echoed around him, a cacophony of shock. Whispers of blame filled the air. Did he lose her? What kind of father? "Shut up," he spat, fury erupting as he dashed deeper into the crowd, eyes scanning desperately. "She's just a girl." Then, suddenly, a flash of movement caught his eye. A figure emerged from the smoke, someone small. His heart surged. "Isabella!" he screamed, lunging forward. But as the smoke cleared, what appeared before him shattered his heart. It wasn't Isabella. It was a child, dirty and ragged, clutching a doll that looked like it had fought a losing battle with life. "Please, sir, help me." The girl's voice cracked, and Richard's chest tightened. "Where is she?" he demanded, scanning the crowd again. "I don't know," she sniffed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "They took her. They drove away." "Who took her?" Richard's voice trembled as anger surged within. He felt the world around him slipping. Before the girl could answer, the ground beneath them shook violently. A second explosion echoed close by, rattling the air and sending a wave of panic through the crowd. People screamed, and Richard grabbed the girl, shielding her against his chest as debris fell around them. "Everyone out, now!" came a commanding voice. Through the chaos, Richard glimpsed a shadow, a figure standing firm, arms raised as they tried to control the crowd. It was Marissa, calm in the madness, her face a fortress of steadiness. But then he felt a flicker of confusion twisting in his memory. With a sudden, heart-stopping realization, it struck him. She was the one who had pushed them all into this nightmare. He knew it now. As his mind reeled, The masked men charged forward, eyes fixed on Marissa. "Get back," one shouted, anger and confusion flashing in his eyes. Suddenly, Marissa stepped forward, raising her hands. "Just listen." She glanced at Richard, desperation crossing her features. "You have to trust me. I didn't betray you." "Didn't betray me?" Richard's voice was a harsh whisper, heavy with disbelief. "You've been in this all along. Please." Marissa's eyes filled with urgency. "They knew I would help. They promised to keep everyone safe. But before she could finish, a loud pop echoed through the air. Richard's heart dropped as he turned, horror flooding through him. It was the flash drive, the one full of the family secrets, this time falling from Marissa's pocket. He lunged for it just as she reached down, and in that frantic second, realization struck like lightning. The secrets they'd hidden away for all these years, the guilt they bore, it could all blow apart in one explosion of truth. And then Richard's head spun. Isabella wasn't just missing. She was part of this twisted confession. The connection between the families, the lies that had buried him. Was his daughter a pawn in a game played by Marissa? "Marissa!" he shouted, fury and despair mixing into a storm. "What have you done? Where is she?" But the moment shattered as the world exploded into chaos. Flames erupted from the building beside them, lighting up the night like a firework gone wrong. People screamed, and Richard felt the heat rushing closer, felt it threatening to consume them all. "Richard, look out!" Emily's voice rang as she yanked him back. They stumbled, heartbeats pounding in tandem, and he realized they were running out of time, running toward a truth he wasn't ready to face. Then, in a heartbeat, the truth landed. A revelation so catastrophic it twisted his very existence. The girl in his arms, the one he witnessed getting taken, wasn't just anyone. It was Isabella. How had he not seen it? But how could that even be? He couldn't wrap his mind around what he had just discovered. "Isabella!" he screamed, the name tearing through him like a blade. "Isabella!" But as the flames roared and the crowd erupted into a panic, Richard was left with a stark reality, a moment that would shatter everything. He had lost her, but what if he had lost something far more valuable than just his daughter? As the world crumbled around him, everything faded to black, and in that suffocating darkness, Richard felt the weight of a terrifying question engulf him. Had he ever truly known his family at all? Richard blinked against the smoke, his heart racing as the world around him burned with chaos. He had to find Isabella. She was somewhere in this frenzy, and he couldn't lose her again. "Isabella!" he yelled, panic twisting his gut. But just as he turned, he caught a glimpse of the masked men rushing through the haze. They were shouting, their movement sharp, determined. "We need to split up," Emily urged, grabbing Richard's arm. "If we stay together, we're all going to be taken." "No!" he roared. But even as he protested, he saw Marissa running toward them, the flash drive clutched like a lifeline. "This way!" She shouted, drawing the attention of the nearest man. "Go, now!" Adrenaline surged through Richard. He didn't have a choice. They followed Marissa, weaving through the alley, the air thick with heat and confusion. "We can't leave her," Richard yelled, glancing back, desperation clawing at his throat. "She's protecting us. She's our only chance." Emily pulled him along, urgency in her voice. They rushed past the wreckage, hearts pounding, each step echoing against the walls of despair. And they spotted her. Isabella stood by the flickering light of the flames, eyes wide with fear, frozen like a deer in headlights. "Isabella!" Richard's voice broke as he sprinted toward her. He swept her into his arms, gripping her tight. "I thought I lost you. I was scared, Dad," she whimpered, burying her face into his shoulder. Relief washed over him, a balm against the chaos. "I won't let anything happen to you, I promise." The heat flared behind them, igniting memories of his failures, the lies he'd hidden, the trust he'd broken. But in this moment, She was his priority. "Keep moving," Marissa shouted, urging them forward. They dove into a side street, hearts racing. The sound of approaching sirens echoed in the distance. Hope blazed bright for a second. Help is coming! But then a sharp crack of gunfire shattered that hope. Richard's body jerked, panic overtaking him. "Go," he shouted, nudging Emily and Isabella along. They couldn't stop, couldn't think, only run. Amid the shuffle, he felt something hard in his pocket, the flash drive. Marissa had pushed it into his hands earlier, and now it felt like a ticking bomb. It held the truth, the key to everything that had gone wrong. Where did it lead? Was this how they would save themselves? Then came the voices. Get them! The men's shouting was relentless, closing in like shadows. They could feel the darkness creeping closer, howling in pursuit. But Richard kept those fears buried deep within him. He needed to focus. Suddenly, they turned a corner, breathless and wide-eyed, stumbling into a hidden park. The air was different here, quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos they'd fled. Over there, Marissa pointed. A station wagon sat parked, doors ajar, a beacon of distant safety. Richard pushed Isabella ahead, forcing himself to stay calm for her. "Get in," he urged, eyes darting around. But just as they dashed toward the car, they heard a voice behind them. "Stop, right there!" One of the masked men emerged from the shadows, eyes ablaze. Isabella cried out, clutching Richard tighter. In that moment, time seemed to freeze. Richard felt the weight of his past come flooding back, the choices he'd made, the people he'd hurt, the love he'd taken for granted. Could he ever atone for it? Could he protect his daughter and keep this family together? But then, just as the man lunged, Marissa stepped into harm's way. "No!" Richard shouted, but it was too late. A struggle erupted, and in a burst of fury, she shoved the man back. "Run!" she shouted, seconds before he fell, struggling to regain control. "Get out of here! I'll hold them off!" She thrust the flash drive into Richard's hand, desperation in her eyes. He hesitated, torn between his instinct to protect and the urgent need to escape. But as the sirens grew louder, a decision crystallized in his mind. "Come with us!" he yelled back, raw determination tightening his voice. She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "This is my fight too, Richard. Just go, trust me." And with a heavy heart, Richard forced himself to turn. He took Isabella's hand, and as they ran, he felt a splintering in his chest, a loss that would echo forever. They reached the car, breathless and shaking. Richard slid in the driver's seat, heart pounding as he cranked the engine. The world outside blurred. Escape was nearly in sight, but the truth loomed larger. As they sped away, smoke and chaos in the rearview mirror, he couldn't shake the feeling of loss. Would he ever understand what was really happening? "Where do we go now, Dad?" Isabella asked, her small hand shaking in his. Richard looked at her, love mixing with fear. "I'll figure it out. We'll find a way." But deep down, a question loomed. What if the truth was worse than the lies they had lived? As they drove into the unknown, the weight of unresolved mysteries settled heavily on his shoulders. A shroud of secrets left to unravel, and with each passing moment, Richard couldn't shake the sense that this was only the beginning. You must subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that will unfold. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help elevate these thrilling sagas. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this shocking ending, and for the love of all that's thrilling, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to know how this story ends. Don't wait one more second to show your support. Only true fans understand the urgency of these actions. Let's keep the